Good evening, everyone. My name's Demi Cole. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I would like to just go through some basic housekeeping and procedures should we need them. So the toilets are on the ground floor. So if you just walk straight to the bottom, turn left out the door and then go straight down the stairs. There's also a ramp as well if anyone needs it. If there is a fire alarm, it is a real emergency, so please all follow straight to the bottom, turn left, and we will escort you out as well. What we will do is, there's programmes on each chair that everyone so will know what we're going through. So I would like to now hand over and welcome the Lord Mayor of Manchester, Councillor Donna Ludford.
Good evening, everyone. We come together this evening to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day, and I would like to thank the National Holocaust Centre and Museum for their help in organising this event. I would also like to thank Janine Webber BEM for being here today to share her story. When we listen to the stories and hear the testimonies of the Holocaust survivors, it reinforces not only the gravity of those painful events, but the necessity of remembering them and of reflecting on our own thoughts and behaviours so that never again really does mean never again. Holocaust Memorial Day serves as a poignant reminder of the senseless loss of life through genocide. It is an opportunity to educate current generations about the dangers of persecution, anti-Semitism, racism, discrimination in all its forms. Today, we remember the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust, members of other communities who suffered Nazi persecution and the millions murdered in genocides that have taken place since in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. At the same time, we must learn the lessons of history, because one of the best ways we can honour those who have perished is not only to keep their memory and testimony alive, but to make the effort to understand how these horrors could unfold in the first place. The experiences and suffering of the Jewish people and the genocides that have followed in the years since teach us that consequences of the perpetrators' prejudice and the bystanders' indifference will always be devastating, and that we must be ready to challenge those who seek to sow the seeds of hatred and division. The perpetrators, bystanders, heroes, victims and survivors were all ordinary people. Just like us, it is up to us to do what we can to challenge intolerance and prejudice wherever we encounter it. Holocaust Memorial Day helps us all to learn more about the past, empathise with people today who are facing persecution, so that together with knowledge and empathy, we can take steps together for a better future. I would now like to introduce Mark Russlin, Director of the Learning at the National Holocaust Centre and Museum. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much for those incredibly powerful words. It's lovely to be with you all here tonight. We've got some distinguished guests, but I'm going to use the word ordinary to describe every one of us in here tonight. Because the theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day, I think, is an incredibly powerful one and an incredibly apposite one. It's ordinary people. So I lead learning at the Holocaust Centre and Museum, and quite often if you ask a group of children before they've studied the Holocaust, who did the Holocaust? They'll blame it on one man. They'll say it was Hitler. And if you broaden it out a bit further, they might blame it on a few others, and you might come up with some other names that we could all name, but 10 people maximum. Then they might broaden it out a bit further and say, well, there's a few more Nazis, but you never get beyond a group of about 20 people. They think that 20 people could have perpetrated the slaughter of 6 million Jewish people and countless others from different groups. That they could have perpetrated the genocide of 2/3 of European Jewish people. 90% of European Jewish children perished in the Holocaust. They think that that was possible because of a handful of people, when of course it was not. Every single person who was caught up in the Holocaust was an ordinary person. And the kind of secret is most of them weren't German. They came from every single European country. 22 countries were caught up in the Holocaust. So 22 countries provided victims of the Holocaust, including our own. 22 countries provided perpetrators of the Holocaust, including our own. So provided people who pulled the trigger, who manned the death camps, who guarded the ghettos, all of those people. But 22 countries as well provided bystanders. And that is why this theme of ordinary people is so powerful, because it was the bystanders who were instrumental in making this genocide happen. The perpetrators could not have done this on their own. The bystanders had to be there to make it and allow it to happen. And some made and allowed it to happen because of fear, consequences. Some allowed it to happen because of indifference. But the dirty secret is that plenty of people allowed it to happen because they agreed, because they thought it was the right thing, because they felt that the Jewish people were a threat to them that had to be removed. And so here tonight, yes, we're going to listen to testimony from an incredible lady whose story is not ordinary, it's extraordinary, partly because of who she is, and also partly because she survived. It's an extraordinary story. But we're also here to ask a slightly more difficult question, and that's the question, could we do it? Because everyone who did it was an ordinary person. And if everyone who did it was an ordinary person, and we're ordinary people, then surely we could do it as well. And so we're here tonight to ask that really difficult question. Why did it happen? Could we do it? How did these ordinary people perpetrate this genocide to other ordinary people just like them? So we're going to hear from Janine in about 6 minutes. But before we do that, we're going to show a video. Now, this is a video that I can't take any credit for because it happened before I joined the museum. But Janine can absolutely take credit for. And it's a collaboration between Janine, who you're going to hear first on the screen and then in person, and a New York hip-hop artist called Kapu. So I think the lights are going to be dimmed, and we're going to hear a little introduction to the story that you're going to hear in more depth afterwards. Let's come in.
I cannot forget it.
Well, I was born in 1932 in a town called Lvov. We were Jewish.
I hope you're listening.
The war started when I was 7. I knew there was a war, but I didn't think there was anything wrong. But the Ukrainians didn't like the Jews, so the first thing that happened, they started killing.
Born a Jew, doesn't mean much to the likes of me and you. Oh Janine, where have you been? What have you seen?
A child on the run from a killing machine.
one day, the Gestapo, we hid in a hole under the wardrobe. And my father came running in and he said, the Germans are after me. We were Jewish. To escape, he jumped.
Jump, jump, daddy, jump. Trying to get away, make a leap for freedom, just to live another day. Run, daddy, run, get it from the floor. Can't you hear them laughing while they're breaking down the door? Fly, daddy, fly, fly so high. I promise that your baby girl will try not to die. I'll try not to die, try not to cry. Fly, daddy, fly. Fly, daddy, fly.
Fly, daddy, fly. Fly, daddy, fly. I promise that your baby girl will try not to die. Try not to die. Try to stay alive. Try not to die.
Fly, daddy, fly. Yellow star, talking from afar.
I asked my mother, what happened to my father? And my mother told me they had shot my father.
Think about that.
You know, they shot my father, shot my grandmother. My mother died in the ghetto. They killed my brother, who was 7.
7 years old. Think about that.
Edek, a young man called Edek, a Polish Catholic. He hid 14 Jews. Edek. Because in Poland, if they saw somebody hiding Jews, they would shoot them immediately. There were no questions. But Edek is quite an incredible man. He risked his life. I'm forever grateful to him. He risked his life. Edek.
He's a hero.
He's a hero to hide people. I never knew his surname, only knew his first name. Edek.
Edek.
He risked his life. Edek. Edek.
Edek.
My message is tolerance.
Tolerance.
To accept people and not to persecute them, not to hate people who are different, who have a different color of the skin, for instance, or a different religion. My hope is that it will make them a little more understanding of minorities. Because we are all human beings.
1932, born in June.
We are all human beings.
We are all human beings.
Give her testimony and to answer the question, who was Edek? Janine Webber.
Hello, everyone. Okay, it's on the mic, yes. I will be speaking. I think I've got about 40 minutes, and then I welcome questions. For me, questions are very important, so do not hesitate. Just ask me any question. I was born in eastern Poland in 1932. So just to help you with calculations, I am just over 90. And I was born in Lwów, which was Poland, which is now Lviv, Ukraine. And I will show you the map of Poland as it was before the war. Now maybe we can move so that I can, yeah. And the black spot where I was born, Lvov, Lvov was the third biggest Polish town. It's a very beautiful town. And I went to Lvov with my son first to find the house where I was born, then with my late husband. And I took these photos, lovely buildings. In Lvov, we lived right in the center of the town in a two-story building. We lived on the second floor, very modest, very small apartment. I will mention it again, it's important, it's relevant. I lived with my parents, my brother 2 years younger, and my grandmother would take care of me. And I will show you some photos, because both my parents worked. Now, this is the first photo of my family, which by miracle, a miracle, I managed to save. My mother is lying on the grass. I think we are in a little village on holiday. My uncle, her brother, is lying on a deck chair. I wonder why he's wearing pajamas. Behind him is my auntie. Now, she was about 14. I will mention her a lot because she played a very important part in my life. She was the 10th child, and my grandmother, when she was born, was always ill, so she became, my auntie was a bit unruly, a bit of a rebel. There are 3 sweet girls. I wonder if you recognize me. Anybody? It is the middle one, yes, yes. I am always smiling. I think I must have been a very happy child. Am I still so sweet? Well, over 80 years older. Anyway, the baby in the pram is my cousin Nina. She was about 10 months old here. She and her parents and her brother, they lived in the same building. They too had a flat on the first floor. The other girl is just the daughter of some friends. My uncle, perhaps a year or 2 later, married and had a baby, and they were killed. And this is my father, you see, very elegantly dressed. And another photo, my mother holding my brother's hand. He was about 2, and I'm holding on to her. And, you know, I remember this dress my mother used to wear. It was yellow, very pale yellow. And as a small child, I always thought my mother was so elegant and so beautiful. But, you know, I think most of the children, small children, think so of their mother. In 1939, as you most likely know, the war started. Germany and Russia, or the Soviet Union, as it was called then, had a pact, and they divided Poland into 2. Western Poland became German, Eastern Poland, where we lived, became Russian, and the Russians came to our town. My life under the Russians didn't change that much, except I was sent to school. I was 7, and children in Poland start school when they're 7. But I was very much aware that my parents were always whispering to each other. And when I asked my mother, what is going on? And my mother said, the Russians are sending to Siberia people with money and property. And of course, they didn't want to be sent to Siberia. As you know, it's one of the coldest places on our planet. And we were not sent to Siberia because we didn't have a lot of money. And the little flat where we lived, it was so modest, so small, and I don't even know if it belonged to us. After the war, I regretted that we were not sent to Siberia because 50% of the people who were sent to Siberia survived the cold weather. But my parents did not survive the German occupation. In 1941, the Germans decided to start moving eastwards. They forgot about the pact and they wanted to occupy Russia, the Soviet Union. And they came to our town. Now, in Lvov, there were 3 communities, equally divided. There was the Polish Catholic community, Ukrainian community, also Christians, but Orthodox Christians, and the Jewish community. And there were over 150,000 Jews who lived in Lvov. Most of them perished. You know, shot most of the Jews, the Germans started shooting them. It's only later, when they found out that the soldiers couldn't bear the idea of killing children, that they started gassing them. But so most of them were shot or died of starvation or of illness. And I am one of the very few, less than 2%, who survived in Lvov, in Poland actually, because 3 million Jews perished in Poland. Now, so when they came, the Germans, the Ukrainians, who didn't like the Jews, and I'm very sad to mention that because of the present day situation. They started, Ukrainians, persecuting the Jews even before the Germans started. And they, in fact, killed 4,000 of them. And if they saw a girl in the streets who looked vaguely Jewish, they would force her to get undressed. And you see in this photo taken by the Germans, a mother is trying to protect her daughter. In this photo, you see they kicked an old man. They knew he was Jewish because he had a beard. In those days, the Poles, Ukrainians, and Germans didn't have a beard. The religious Jews had a beard. They kicked him, he fell to the ground, and they're laughing. On my right, the German officer, next to him, Ukrainian soldier, because unfortunately a lot of Ukrainians joined the Wehrmacht, the German army. They're laughing, seeing this man on the ground. Very soon the Germans started rounding up Jewish men. And when I was in my flat with my mother and my brother, I heard on our staircase the Germans, what we used to call the Gestapo. You know that word. The Gestapo was the German police, armed police, under the orders of the army. And they were those who were killing the Jews, or rounding them up and taking them away as slave labor. So I heard the Gestapo on our staircase screaming, calling the Jews by very unpleasant names. My father came running in and he said, the Germans after me. And my mother locked the door and my father jumped from our second floor balcony onto the first floor balcony and hid underneath. I took this photo when I went to Lvov about 12 years ago with my late husband. The Gestapo started banging at our door. My mother had to let them in. and they didn't find my father, and they left. When they left, I asked my mother, why do they want my father? And my mother said, it's because we are Jewish. And you know, as a small child, I never thought of myself who I was. One doesn't. I used to play in the streets with, like old children did in those days. And seeing these armed soldiers, I became very frightened. Now, after a couple of hours, my father came back. He was still alive, but he had broken his leg. We were told to leave our flat, to take a minimum a suitcase. We were given a room in a small house for my parents, my brother and myself. My grandmother came and she slept in the corridor. And she was the one who took care of me because both my parents worked. My cousin Nina, whom you saw in the first photo as a baby, she was now between 4 and 5. She and her parents and her brother were thrown out of their flat because they wanted to take over Jewish possessions, everything we possessed. So, and the ghetto was not ready yet. You know, in Poland, every town, big and small, had the ghetto. You might have heard this. The ghetto was an area of a town, usually surrounded by a wall or a fence, where they would send all the Jews, where the conditions became atrocious, unlivable, really. I will tell you a little more about the ghetto in a minute. We were there when my auntie, let me just tell you a few more details about my auntie. I told you she played such an important role in my life. My auntie, she was a rebel, I told you. She rejected our traditions. Nobody took notice of her. For some reason, my mother liked her, and she was always, when we went on holiday, she would always come with us. My auntie came and she said, and also, in addition to that, she was 17 and 41. She got herself a boyfriend. Now, you know, in those days, a girl of 17 didn't have a boyfriend, and it created a scandal in the family. Anyway, she came after a few days there, and her boyfriend was Jewish, but he spoke German, and he had a contact among the German soldiers who would warn him if there was going to be a raid. And she came and she said, try and hide when you hear the Gestapo coming. So my parents dug a hole under the wardrobe, and when we heard the Gestapo coming, my mother, my brother and I, we hid in that hole. But there was no room for my father and my grandmother. And they hid in the attic of the house. My cousin Nina and her mother, they hid in the wardrobe, which was in their room. Her father and her brother, who was about 12, he hid in the attic. The Gestapo found them hiding in the attic. I don't know what they did to my grandmother. I remember her screaming. Maybe they threw her down the ladder. They were very cruel. They didn't find us. And when it was quiet, we left the hole. And very soon I asked my mother, what happened to my father and my grandmother? And my mother said, the Germans shot them, and they shot my uncle Nina's father and her brother. So my mother was left with 2 small children, and we had no money, we had no food. So my auntie managed to sell some clothes, and the money she got, she bought some food and gave it to my mother and to Nina's mother, her other sister. And I remember my mother eating, hold 1 second. My mother would eat boiled peels of potatoes, and she would eat just that, and everything else she would give it to my brother and to me. Then again my auntie came and she said, they're rounding up people, try and hide. So this time when we heard Gestapo, sorry, when we heard them coming, we hid in kennels, in a sort of kennels which was in the courtyard. I remember sitting next to my mother, holding on to her. My brother was there, holding on. Nina, my cousin, was there with her mother. And I remember looking, sorry, looking through the wooden slats and seeing the Gestapo approaching. And you know, I was so frightened that I couldn't look at the faces. I just looked at the boots. They always had these brightly black, bright boots, black boots, and always well polished. And you know, for years, I used to have this nightmare when the boots were coming to get me. Fortunately, I don't have it now anymore. They didn't find us and they left. Very soon we were told to move to the ghetto. We were given a small room for my mother, my brother and I. My mother very soon became ill. And you know, it was very dangerous to be ill in the ghetto. What they used to do, people were dying. There were corpses lying on the pavement. One could see them. They would be left there for a few days. And occasionally they would come and gather the corpses. And if they saw somebody who was ill, they would pick the person up and just threw them on top of the corpses, even if they were still alive. And that's what happened to Nina's mother. She became ill with typhus. They found her, they picked her up and threw her on top of the corpses. She was still alive. And my cousin Nina, who was about 7, she saw it. So when my mother became ill, my uncle, whom you saw in the first photo, in order to protect her, to hide her, carried her into the cellar of that building. I went down to see her. The conditions were awful. There were rats running around. My mother was lying on this iron bed. She looked at a distance. She didn't look at me. She didn't talk to me. And I couldn't understand why, because my mother had always been very loving and very affectionate. I became so upset and so frightened by this situation that I ran out. And I saw my uncle, and my uncle said my mother had died. She died of typhus. You know, typhus is a disease which can be cured if one has medication, but we didn't have any. It's a disease of poverty, of lack of hygiene. People, her friends who knew her, who were still alive, said, using a Yiddish, a Jewish word, Mazel Tov, which means good luck to her. She doesn't have to suffer anymore. And I was left with my brother. My uncle knew a lot of farmers, Polish Catholic farmers, and he found a family to hide my auntie and me, and also families to hide my cousin Nina and my brother. He paid everyone. We were hiding in the stables when one morning the farmer came and he started grabbing my aunt. And I could see she was very upset and frightened. She begged him to let her go. I didn't understand what was going on. You know, I was just over 9. And at that time, children were very innocent and very ignorant. I didn't know anything about any sort of sexual harassment. And suddenly, my auntie got up and ran out of the stables. And I was left with the farmer. They locked me in the room. There was a bed and bucket, no chairs, and I was lying there day after day, week after week. They would bring me occasionally some food. And then I asked them when they came with food, why, I am cold, can you bring me something to cover myself with? They brought me an old man's coat, and I noticed that this coat was infected with crawling head lice. And this might sound horrible to you, but I kept killing them. And I think having something to do saved my sanity, because if you lie there for weeks on end, for months, nobody to talk to, you can lose your mind. And I was beginning to see animals in the walls. After 2 or 3 months, they told me to leave, so I went back to the ghetto. Let me now tell you a few things about the ghetto. The conditions I told you were unbearable. There was so much dirt and corpses lying around. This is the beginning of the ghetto. People were still fairly well dressed at the very beginning. You see a German soldier with a rifle outside the fence. They would only go inside if they were in a group to shoot people or take them away. They were hanging people and leaving them for days and forcing us to look at them, to create terror. People were begging, like this little girl, and upside down. And this lady, you see, she wears, her feet are wrapped in the newspaper, and you see there is a little boy upside down. And here you see how thin he is. The conditions were atrocious, and always we had to think, where do we hide when we hear the Gestapo coming? As I told you, my uncle found one family. Then when I came back, he found another family. Again, farmers, Catholic farmers. And we were there, I was there with my brother when one morning the daughter of the family, who was about 20, came with an armed soldier, with a German soldier, what we used to call SS, you know, those we were really very cruel and nasty. And I knew she brought him to kill us, because by then I knew they were killing all the Jewish people, children and everybody. For some reason, which I cannot explain, he didn't want to kill me. And they killed my brother. He was 7. They told me to walk, and I thought he was going to shoot me, this soldier, but he didn't. So I walked for hours, and I became hungry, so I saw a woman in the fields. I asked her if she would give me a piece of bread. She wanted to know who I was. I knew my aunt had told me never to tell anybody that I was Jewish. So I invented a story. It wasn't too difficult. I told you the Ukrainians didn't like the Jews, but they didn't get on well with the Poles either. And I believe that they killed some of them. So I told her my family was Polish, Catholic, and they were killed. And she believed me, and she took me in. But after a few months, she said she cannot keep me because she learned that I was Jewish and it was too dangerous to hide a Jew. And it was dangerous. She would have been shot immediately. So she bought me a train ticket and I went back to Lvov. I had with me a name and address of a young Polish man called Edek, or Edek, you might pronounce it in English. Edek was 19. He was a night watchman of a convent. He was my family's friend, and when the war started, he said to my uncle, if you ever need some help, try and find me and I'll help you. So I had his name and address, and I found him. He was in an office, and he got up and he said, walk behind me at a distance. He didn't want to be seen with the Jewish girl. He took me to a small building, put a ladder against the wall, and told me to climb. And when I opened the door to the attic, I saw my auntie, my uncle, my auntie's boyfriend, 13 Jews. Edek was hiding 13 Jews, and I was the 14th. He is a hero. He risked his life. He would have been shot immediately. We were there at night. They would go down and they dug a hole under the stable's floor, and one night we all went down that hole. It was very well organized. There were 6 planks and chairs, a bucket, and a bulb in the middle of the ceiling, lit day and night. You know, it's very hot living on the ground. And I remember just wearing my underwear. Also, we had very little food. My auntie would go out at night. She would buy some food and come back the following night. And I remember eating slices of dry bread with chopped up onions. And I loved it. I still like it. I stayed in that hole for nearly a year. My auntie said to me one day, it's too difficult for a child to live in a hole. And she managed to get me some false papers, and one night we left the hole. She took me to the Polish committee, which was formed to help the Poles, because, you know, they too suffered during the war. But the woman who saw me in her office, she said to my aunt, are you sure this girl isn't Jewish? And you know, I'm not surprised, because I was dragging my legs. I could hardly walk because I hadn't used my leg muscles for a year. Also, I was very thin, and I don't know how my face looked. I don't know how one looks living for a year without daylight or fresh air. But my aunt, first of all, nobody suspected her because she was blonde. And in Poland, people believed that all the Jews were very dark. But in my family, quite a few were blonde. And so my aunt was a very articulate, very strong woman, very convinced, so she convinced her that I was a Catholic. So she gave me a letter and I went to a convent. They took me in, but the next morning they said they couldn't keep me any longer because I am most likely very ill and they didn't want the other people to catch my disease. So they bought me a bus ticket and I went to Krakow. I found an orphanage run by nuns and they were very kind to us, but you know, Catholic nuns pray several times a day, and I didn't know the Catholic prayers. So I was sort of moving my lips, pretending that I was, but I was always worried that I might be caught. And also, I could hardly walk. And I asked the Mother Superior, how is it that other children can run and I find it difficult to walk? And she said to me, you know, in something which I will always remember, she said, you have to accept that you will never walk normally. Well, she was wrong. I am a very good walker, actually. So I wasn't very happy there. So one day, when an elderly priest arrived, he said he had a little house and a garden. He could have 4 girls. I asked him if he would take me. And indeed, I would walk around the bushes and sit in the sun, and little by little, I recovered the use of my leg muscles. He was a very kind man, but what I didn't like, we slept in bunk beds. The lower bunk bed where I slept was under a bed where the girl used to wet her bed. But I was always worried it might run on me. But I never wanted to complain because he was so kind and so old. He looked to me so old. So one day when an elderly couple arrived, they said they wanted a girl to help them in the house. I asked them if they would take me, and that is how, at 11 and a half, I became a maid. I worked for them. They had me out to work for another family. Of course, they didn't know I was Jewish, so they sent me to church. And you know, Catholic children have to go to confession to be prepared for the communion. Well, I was actually very good with catechism because I always liked stories, whichever they were. So, but the problem was I didn't know what to confess, what sin I had committed, because by then, going to church every Sunday, I thought maybe I've become a Catholic. Anyway, he accepted that I would do my communion, and I have a photo, unfortunately not here, in my white dress. When I arrived in that village, I wrote to Edek, and I was, nobody replied, so I thought everybody was dead, but 6 months after the war, and let me see, that's my aunt on the right, about 30 years ago. 6 months after the war, my auntie came. She took me to Krakow, put me in a children's home for Jewish children who survived with false papers, so hiding, where I met my cousin Nina. But you know, after the war, there was still a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland. And in fact, a few survivors who went back to get their houses or flats, unfortunately they were killed by the Poles. And there is a film which showed this, made by a Polish Catholic man. It's called Ida, maybe some of you have seen it. So because of this anti-Semitism, and where we lived in Zakopane, well-known winter resort, people knowing we were all Jewish, they would throw stones at us. So after the war, so they decided to leave Poland, and we went, as you see on this coach, we went to Paris. When we arrived in Paris, the people in charge wanted to take the children to Israel, but my auntie wanted to study at La Sorbonne, the French university. So she asked my cousin Nina and me, what do you want to do? Do you want to go with the children to Israel, or do you want to stay in Paris where she was? We both said we wanted to be where she was. Well, she didn't have any money, she was still young, so she put us in a home for Jewish French children, because you know France too was occupied by Germany and a lot of Jewish people were killed. I went to school, my education is French, my language is French, and of course English as well. When I was 24, I came to England just for 3 or 4 months. Actually, I came to Manchester. It was the first town that I got to know. And I was an au pair girl, although I was quite old, I was 24. I just came for 3 months to improve my English. I met an Englishman. And you guess what happened. I have 2 sons and 2 grandsons, and I love them very much. I try to teach my sons to be tolerant, to be helpful to people who were different, even if they had a different religion or a different color of the skin, to be kind to them and to stand up to any persecution. And I'm still improving my English. Thank you very much.
Third time. I think you'll agree what an amazing lady this person is. Also, that's the 3rd time she's done that today. We were in Levenshulme High School and a 2nd school and here today, so the 3rd time that she's done it. So please, another round of applause. Are we okay? We do a question and answer and then forever. So as we're privileged to have Janine with us this evening, we're going to have 2 question and answer sessions, and the first one is going to be with Janine standing in front of us. The second one will be with a virtual Janine. So, first off, do we have any questions for Janine? Sir.
The theme today is ordinary people. I'm so touched by what you said. Thank you for sharing that. In your experience, why do ordinary people do so bad to so many ordinary people? What have you learned in your long life? Answer that.
I learned that we must be kind to each other. If we want to survive as human beings, because we have all the similar origins. You know, we are all humans. And we have all, in fact, the same ancestors, whether we come from some people, Adam and Eve, or whether we come from some chimpanzees. But we have to help each other. We have to be kind and humane towards each other. And that, for me, is very important. Thank you. That's a very good question.
Yeah, Jason.
Jeremy. My name's Jeremy Phillips. I was born in 1938. I was adopted when I was a baby. I wasn't quite sure where I came from. I do know now because my family found me about 15 years ago, and they were from Poland and Ukraine. After the war in London, where I've lived up here 50 years, but in London, we still got things. When I was a child, people used to say, we would be on a bus and somebody would say, oh, your fault, you Jews. We wouldn't have fought the war if it hadn't been for you. There was still, as you say, anti-Semitism going around. And like you said in the Ukraine, it was the same in Lithuania and Latvia. All those people there's only a few Germans. All those people had anti-Semitism. I don't know where anti-Semitism came from. As I say, I'm 85. I still don't know where it came from and what it's about. But I do know that people of my age can see the same thing happening in the Ukraine with Stalin and with, what's his name, Putin, as happened with Hitler. Hitler went into the Sudetenland, we let him get away with it, then he went somewhere else. The same thing happened here. We let Putin go into what's her name? Crimea, let him get away with it. Am I the only person that can see that the same thing's happening all over again? There may not be so much anti-Semitism, I don't know. Did it ever go? But I mean, do you see the same thing happening as you came from there? Is it just me?
I am worried about what's going on in the world, about the persecution of innocent people, about children starving. And I am very worried about it, about the war at our doorstep. Yes, I am, of course, I am. I'm worried about my family because of that, my grandchildren. I mean, now they're quite big because I'm quite old. Well, not very old, but a little old. But they have, both my grandsons, they have girlfriends. They might get married and have children, even without being married, who knows. And I am worried. I'm worried for the future of human beings, yes.
Other question, yeah.
Thank you so much. I can't imagine that you've told that talk 3 times, so thank you for sharing it. It's so important to hear. I was wondering if you could tell us about when you started to talk about your story. I can only imagine you coming here and the trauma and what support you got at that time, but also then when you were able to start talking about it.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, I wasn't able to speak about it for 50 years. And I would cry, but always try at night because I didn't want my children to be upset. And I was frightened. I was frightened to tell people I was Jewish. It was a big problem for me. And my sons, actually I remember in 1996, my son felt that people ought to know my story. So they organized, they called, the Shoah Foundation. It's an organization set up by Steven Spielberg to interview all the survivors. And one of my sons organized this for me to be interviewed and filmed for the Shoah Foundation. And my other son asked me to write my story. I did both, but I became so upset for the first time I was speaking about my life during the war in details, because I never told my sons in details. They knew vaguely what happened, and they learned at school, but anyway. And I became so upset. And that the lady who interviewed me said, you really need some help. And she gave me the telephone number of a psychotherapist. And eventually, after a few weeks, I got in touch with him. And he helped me. And I used to see him, for about 3 or 4 years I saw him. And after that, he said to me, you should start speaking in schools. And that's how it happened.
Thank you, and thank you for your powerful testimony and for sharing it with so many people. The question I ask follows on from the last question. How do you trust people again after what you experience?
How do I trust people? Well, I think I am an optimist. And I really believe that deep down people are good. And I know there are a lot of charities who help people in all sorts of ways. And so I really, generally, I trust people. But, you know, it took me a while, and, you know, before I would admit that I was Jewish, because at work, where I work, people didn't know I was Jewish, didn't know anything about the war, about me. And I was frightened. I was frightened, but, you know, I am Jewish, and I'm quite proud of being Jewish. It's a very, very old, I don't know, people, tradition, nation, you can call it whatever, but it's very old and very rich. They are very rich people. Rich, I mean intellectually, scientifically. So I'm quite proud being Jewish, yes.
Okay, if there are no more questions... Oh,
It
sorry,
is, yeah.
couldn't see around the corner. Well, if there are no more, but there are.
Hello. So I work in museums, and my question was regarding museums and letting the Holocaust legacy live on, and obviously showing ordinary lives. What do you think, or what piece of advice would you give for me looking at Holocaust studies and trying to commemorate people?
I'm sorry, but I didn't quite get, you know, the sound is, can you repeat?
Just the last bit again.
What would you say in museums? How would you commemorate people? And what's one piece of advice you'd give for someone like me working in Holocaust studies and museums?
How to remember?
Yeah, how should museums commemorate people?
Well, I'm very concerned about the fact that a lot of survivors, well, quite a lot of them are very, very old. I'm not the only one. And, you know, they are dying, a lot of them. They're quite, I can see quite often people whom I knew, and because a lot of them, and most of them are well over 80, and a lot of them over 90. And I feel we ought to remember. And I know that there is in London the idea of setting up a new memorial, not in a museum. This is outside. It's a bit controversial about that memorial, but I would be very happy to have a memorial somewhere, but and museums to show, like the Imperial War Museum in London, and there is a whole section where they show survivors, their family, and I am there too with one of my sons and a lot of my friends, you know, and we told our story. I think it should be remembered. We have to remember because we have to realize that we cannot be inhuman and be unkind to other people, to innocent people. It's not allowed. It's a question of surviving this on our planet, to be kind to each other. So I do believe we have to do something, whether it's museums or outside, to remember.
Yeah, lady here. Just one more. I think the microphone's gone back, so if you shout, I will make sure it's heard.
Yeah.
I'm a child of a survivor, so I'm second generation. My father was a campsite in Auschwitz. I have a picture of him in Auschwitz on my phone at the moment. I was wondering what you thought the role of second generation, third, fourth generation should be in perpetuating testimony of survivors, and it links with what obviously you just said now.
Well, yes.
Sorry, could I just repeat it for the benefit of the people
Okay.
watching online? So apologies if I paraphrase it wrongly because there's no mic. So the lady said that her father was in Auschwitz. The lady's a second generation survivor, and she's asking how should second and third generation survivors be involved in Holocaust education?
Well, thank you. Thank you for suggesting and asking about it. Yeah, well, you know, the various organizations, and Bet Shalom is one of them, the National Holocaust Survivor Centre and Museum. They are one of the organizations, but there are others who actually train second generation, because they know very well that unfortunately we are not going to last. I am carrying on until the end, and I hope I will still, it will take many years. I don't want to disappear. And I have been watching a program on television which says how to live at 100. So I'm preparing myself, you know. And sorry? And you know, so I know, but they are training young people to talk about it. Yes, I know, a lot of it is done. But you know, when we are gone, it has to continue.
Okay, there will be an opportunity to ask Janine questions when we have the reception afterwards, but I think you'd agree, I'm 42, and if I've got your energy at 45, I'll be pretty happy, to be honest. But as Janine says, it's incumbent on all of us who are involved in Holocaust education to prepare for a time when we don't have the benefit of first-hand wisdom from people like Janine. So at the National Holocaust Centre and Museum, we've created a resource called the Forever Project. And that is Janine and 10 other survivors that we've recorded for, I think it was 5 days, wasn't it? So even longer than this event. So 5 days of constant questioning so that we can turn those 11 survivors into virtual versions of themselves. Now this is a tool that obviously we can use at events like this, we can use in schools. We've looked at some research which suggests that if you learn in this conversational way, it's about 20% more effective than if I just stand here and talk at you like I am now. So, we're going to watch a little, very short video introducing the Forever Project and why it's here, and then I'm going to very quickly interview the virtual Janine on the stage. Now, this is a tool that you can use 2 ways. You can type into it, or you can speak. Unfortunately, because we're in a room like this, the speaking version doesn't work. So I'm going to look very clever by typing without having a computer in front of me, but you can thank Demi at the back for that. So if we could just dim the lights and show the description of the Forever Project, that would be great.
Some experiences haunt us forever.
They killed my brother, child who was 7.
Some events scar us forever.
There were so many people dying that you didn't even look for the body.
Some memories traumatize us forever.
My father was amongst the first that was taken, and I remember the fear.
Some pain tears at us forever.
I cannot really forgive.
Yet, some people we meet inspire us forever. They lift us up forever.
It's such a powerful thing to hear.
They touch us and change our lives forever.
It's groundbreaking. Can teach you a lot about humanity.
It's a way of preserving survivors' stories.
The Forever Project uses AI technology to enable young people to meet, interact, and share incredible moments with Holocaust survivors, not just today.
This is the opportunity for pupils to ask somebody who was there.
But forever.
Maybe that's the reason why I stayed alive, to tell the story, what happened.
So even after they've gone, their warmth, wisdom, and impact will stay with us Forever.
Forever.
When we hear about the Holocaust, we often just hear about the statistics. What the Forever Project helps to do is demonstrate to children that those statistics were all real people.
Did you ever consider escaping the concentration camps?
Nobody escaped there because we were told.
To be able to hear the answers to questions that we've been wanting to ask, it's much more powerful.
It's quite amazing.
The Forever Project. Because truth, love, and understanding must live on.
Forever.
Forever.
Forever. Forever.
Forever.
Forever. The Forever Project. Produced by and exclusive to the National Holocaust Centre and Museum.
So we're now going to see a very quick glimpse of the Forever Project. And if you don't mind, Janine, I'm going to interview the virtual Janine on the stage. Very quick interview. So as we're just getting it up. So as you can see, Janine appears there in a beautiful red Chesterfield. And I'm going to ask the first question. Janine, who helped you to survive?
I am sorry, we didn't record an answer to that question.
So that's one of the answers that we've recorded to show you what happens when 14-year-old students ask questions like, did you meet Hitler? I'm going to ask a second one. Janine, what happened to Edek?
Edek survived. 2 weeks before the end of the war, he was caught by the Germans. They didn't have time to kill him or torture him, and they started fleeing because the Russians were coming, and he survived.
And then the final question, I think possibly one of the most poignant. Janine, did you thank Edek?
This is my great regret, that when I left the hall, I never saw him, and I never thanked him. I never thanked him, and it's my great regret.
So there is literally 5 days worth of filming. There are very few questions that there isn't an answer for, and for those questions where there isn't an answer, you've seen that there's still an answer. So I'm going to hand over now for the final part of the event for the group reading the Statement of Commitment. Who's that? I think it's the rabbi, if that's all right. Oh, sorry, I'm reading off this. Thank you.
I'm going to lead us in our memorial prayer as we continue to reflect, to mourn for the losses of all those we've heard about, the souls and the vitality of their lives, the goodness that we've heard today, to reflect and to stand alongside Janine here tonight. God, full of compassion, whose presence is over us, may the souls of our 6 million dead and all those who were murdered in the Shoah, who have gone to their everlasting home with the holy and pure on high, who shine as the lights of heaven, find the safety and rest denied them on earth beneath the shelter of your presence. Source of mercy, cover them in the shelter of your wings forever and bind their souls into the gathering of life. It is God who is their heritage. May they be at peace in their place of rest. And we say, Amen.
El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanafei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utaharim, Kazoa Harakia Mazhirim, Lenishmot 6,000,000 Acheinu va'achotenu shemetu al Kiddush Hashem, Yanuchu v'shalva u'v'shalom shelo yad'u b'chayehem. Hana Bal harachamim, hasdireim b'seite kanafecha leolamim, utzaroa b'tzroa hachayim et nishmatam, Adonai hu nachalatam, ve'anuchu v'shalom al mishkavam, v'noma, v'noma, Amen. We're going to hold a minute's silence in just one moment. Through Janine's powerful testimony, we've seen deeply into your soul and into the souls of your family members. And what a powerful response. At the end, you spoke of tolerance and of kindness after all the inhumanity, the violence and hate that there was. So on your seats, you'll find an envelope. And in the envelope, there's a name of someone who was killed in the Shoah, in the Holocaust. And it's a moment to reflect, to see the face of the other, to see the divine spark, the value and goodness in each person whom you're going to be holding in your heart in this minute's silence. Zichronam livracha, may their memories continue to be for a blessing. Amen. Please be seated. To close our event, I'm going to ask Councillor Midgley, Deputy Leader, to come and say a few words.
Thank you. So I've got the pleasure of closing this event. I don't know if I've got the words to do it justice after listening to Janine, but thank you so much, Janine, for sharing your story with us. It was so incredibly moving and powerful. And to hear it from you in person in your own words was brilliant. You are an amazing storyteller, you really are. You know, to detail that horror, but also for your optimism and your faith in human kindness is just inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think it's really brought home to me just how important it is to hear people's stories, whether that's people who suffer persecution, refugees, asylum seekers, people from different communities, so that we can understand their lives, their backgrounds, their hopes and their dreams, so that we can learn how to make things better from their experiences and to promote understanding and that tolerance that you talked about, Janine, that is so important. And that's why things like the Forever Project, it's just brilliant, that is amazing. And that's going to be so important to kind of get the message out to school children so that they can learn about it as well. So as a city, it's really important that we unite and remember the Holocaust. We must stand together to make sure that intolerance and hatred for others has no place in our society. And it's so important for us to speak up against prejudice of all forms. We need to stand up, and we need to be a little bit more like Edek. We are ordinary people just like everybody who encountered the Holocaust. And that's a great theme, isn't it? By standing together, we can make a difference and create a safe and inclusive atmosphere for all our residents in this city and beyond. Manchester was a safe haven for Jewish people escaping persecution over 150 years ago, and I'm so proud that we are still welcoming people of every race and religion, especially those who have been forced to leave their home countries. Janine, it's great to hear that you spent your time in Manchester. I hope you got a warm welcome then. We certainly are giving you one tonight. I hope you feel it. And it's great to welcome you back to the city. We want to say, whoever you are and wherever you have come from, Manchester will always welcome you. I just want to say a final couple of thank yous. First of all, to the people that have organised this event tonight. I think it's been a joint effort between our Mayor Civic team and also our fantastic Equality and Diversity team. And it's really important to put events on like this so that we can have time to reflect and remember. And thank you to all of you for joining us, whether it's in person here or online. And I hope you found it as powerful and as moving and inspirational as I have. So thank you very much.
And thank you from us to all of you for coming and for hosting a Yorkshireman the other side of the Peak District. So I hope, I think drinks are outside, just outside now, so I hope you can all join us for drinks. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. I love that. So good.
Yeah. By the way, it was the first time I ever skipped 3 times. I've never done it.